Hello, guys and girls. The program you are about to hear will be both fun and educational, but it is not a substitute for medical advice. Although we are doctors, we are not your doctors.
Hello and welcome to Travel Medicine. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood internal medicine doc, Dr. J.
Hey all, this is Dr. Santhosh, pediatric infectious disease doc and a researcher.
Hey, it's me, Dr. Han, Dr. Ward. I found a few hours in between shifts and I'm joining my buddies.
This is the original trio was Dr. Josh as our fearless leader, and then Dr. Santhosh and Dr. Ward as his two devoted lackeys.
Did you just refer to yourself in the third person and as a lackey?
Oh yeah, I'm all about the henching. I know how to hench.
Professional hencher.
Sounds derogatory. What's a lackey?
Oh no.
It's a little bit like a minion, but less training. Well, we are going to talk about some another team and some explorers in this episode. And I figured since it takes us way back to when we began with Dr. Ward, that we would bring him along for just a fun little joyride in the Wayback Machine and see where we land. Today, we're trying one of our newer segments to this season, which is called, appropriately, Who Charted?
Dun dun.
And we are going to explore the medical contributions of somebody who is famous, but maybe not famous for things that you were aware of. And today's subject will be Dr. Livingstone, I presume.
Dr. Livingstone, I'm a huge fan. I hope I get to talk to him a lot and get in his head.
Well, I will warn you, Ward, that the Wayback Machine is not necessarily configured for 3 people. It's been a while. So, hang on tight. We don't want you falling off and getting lost in the time stream or memories. So, Santhosh, buckle in and
we can aftermarket flux capacitor. It's kind of on the glitch.
Yeah. Those energy sources from the Mr. Garbage. It's not working out quite as well.
Ward, do you think you could set us off with a Great Scott?
Great Scott!
All right. So I am going to set this for 1870. So we'll try and catch Livingstone after he's gone through a lot of his things so we can talk with him. And let's see what we find as we ramp this up, and away we go.
I'll just put on this helmet that's blinking and has an error light on. We'll see what happens.
No way! Come on! Oh. Again with this. Why did you leave that helmet in here again, Josh? There's no reason for it to be here.
It adds to the aesthetic.
It's experimental and it does weird things.
Like I said, aesthetic. So, all right. Well, you know what? That's fine. I'm sure we'll catch Ward somewhere around later. But for now, let's get started with the episode. It is 1870 in the Bangwelu swamps in the area that is now northern Zambia. So the Bangwelu is, in the local language, means where the water meets the sky. And it's pretty easy to understand why. We're going to be looking for an old man, aged 60. So we're trying to catch Livingstone closer to the end of his exploration. And, you know what? Actually, do you see over there, there's kind of a older, pale gentleman kind of traipsing through the swamp, taking some notes.
He looks weirdly familiar.
He does. Little thin, little sick.
Okay.
And
oh, sir.
Oh, yeah. Hi. By any chance, are you? Can I say it, Santhosh? Do you think? No, I won't. I won't. I'm not going to do it.
What? I mean, I'm sure he's heard it like a million times. Like this is, the time when you kept walking up to Bono
All
and
right.
saying, "Hey, you too."
All right. I'm gonna try it. All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Excuse me, sir. And pardon me if I'm being rude, but are you by any chance Dr. Livingstone, I presume?
Hey guys, it's me,
M-
Dr. Livingstone.
Oh,
Oh, you sound remarkably young and healthy. Much more energetic given your 60
that
years in Africa than I would have expected.
yeah. In fact, I swear I've heard that voice before.
It's the gin and tonic. It keeps me young.
Dr. Livingstone, would you mind terribly? I know we're dressed a little oddly, but if you're willing to believe us, my colleague and I are physicians from the future who were very inspired by you, and we were hoping we could get a little bit of a firsthand account of some of the things that you've done in your life and share those medical discoveries and knowledge with our students. Would that be all right?
What brought you down here to, South Central Africa? This is kind of a dangerous place for you to be.
Well, you know, I've always I've always been an adventurous person. I've always loved to travel, and when she was alive, may she rest in peace, she said, "Hey, let's go to Hawaii or Tahiti." And I said, "Nope, Central Africa."
Well, I understand that even before you met your wife, you kind of got your start in missionary work, correct?
That was my first love, the Lord.
But and you'll pardon me, although the Lord may have been your first love, you were not, shall we say, the Lord's most effective employee. How many converts did you manage to get again?
One.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what brought you back? I
A
mean,
bunch of people actually converted away from Christianity after I
oh,
spoke with them. I was
oh
Whoa.
dear.
Oh God.
Well, I sorry to hear that, sir. I imagine that was quite discouraging.
Yep. I was. The Lord said, if you're not good at one thing, try something else. So, what are you gonna do? I'm the
And
decent doctor.
well, I mean, at least you had a nice trip down here, right? Where you got to see beautiful things and wander about, and I'm sure in your younger years you were hale and hearty, and it was otherwise a pleasant journey.
Oh, when I was younger, I had a six pack, big biceps. I was a good looking dude.
You started your career, you kind of bootstrapped yourself up from poverty and you attended medical school in Scotland at Anderson's College in Glasgow. And originally, I know you wanted to go to China, but the postings just were few and far between for missionary work. So instead, you opted for Africa. Uh, Again, I know first you wanted to be more of a missionary and ended up changing more towards the medical side later. But things have changed in terms of disease from your time in the future. So you've been taught that Africa fever is a disease in and of itself, just something that's dangerous to you. We actually have discovered that African fever is something a little bit different. It's a symptom, not a disease of one that you are very familiar with, something called malaria.
Well, the 19th century was an interesting time. We were discovering so many things. It feels wrong now to call it African fever, but we just kind of, you were in Africa and you had a fever, and we just called it that at different times. But yeah, I have personally come down with malaria a lot of times. A lot.
How
Oh,
many would you say if you had to ballpark?
Oh, I don't know, 27 times.
oh,
Is
That's
is
that
that a
is a
lot? Is
lot.
that a
oh my
lot?
gosh.
That is a lot of malaria.
You are a terribly tenacious individual. I mean, Josh, I don't know about you, but I think I might have thought pretty hard about giving up around malaria number 4 or 5. You?
Like malaria number 2.
Yeah. Yeah, it is not a fun disease, you must have become intimately kind of, uh, you know, quite understanding of the symptoms and everything.
Well, on my 26th time, I did think, what am I doing here? But you know what? I it actually just strengthened my resolve to actually find a cure and a treatment. It kills a lot of people here in
Yes.
Africa and in other parts of the world.
So did you find a treatment during your early travels? I mean, you're still around, so I feel like you must have.
Well, I am from the Great Britain, and I do like my drinks. So you we one day we were looking for something to spruce up the sherry, and a little bit of quinine kind of was nice. And you know what? It turned out that was good for malaria.
Malaria, of course, we know in our time is endemic to so much of Africa. Now, I know you are of the opinion that it is in fact bad air, hence the name malaria, that causes the disease. It turns out that's not quite the case, but I don't want to give spoilers, too many spoilers for the future. So, what did you do? Like, did you pack a lot of quinine? I mean, you had it 27 times, so I wonder, was this a case of good or poor preparation?
Yeah, as in, did you have to bring extra suitcases to carry it with you?
I feel bad having contracted it 27 times. You don't need to malaria shame me, but it was it was.
Sorry, good sir.
But I actually it was this is endemic to actually to the area, and almost a large portion of the population gets this, and that's also why a lot of people died young, and there were uh, the infant mortality rate and all that stuff was not that great back in the days.
So,
It's still pretty bad where we are if you don't have access to the medication that you're talking about.
Hmm. Well, I mean, also we didn't really. I mean, I thought it was bad air. So it's the 19th century. So we kind of did a lot of things by trial and error. I just kept drinking medications until my ears rang, or if I woke up.
oh, I mean,
Oh,
and that scientific method is something that's incredibly impressive. I mean, you wrote in your journals, and I'm sorry if this is a little invasive because we both have read your journals extensively, uh, but you noted multiple times that mosquitoes were always present where the disease was, but you never quite you always felt it was just, well, mosquitoes hang out in this area, and there's bad air in this area, and then there's malaria, and you never quite drew any other connections beyond that. But the quinine, I heard you actually got the idea from reading another explorer's journal that it was going to be protective. What can you tell us about that?
Well, at nighttime, we didn't have a lot of things to read. I already read Lord of the Rings too many times. So I picked up Journals of the Niger Exploration by William Ike. Have you heard of it? Have you heard of him? That gentleman?
Oh yeah, he was the one he used to take quinine with sherry. So this was before the gin and tonic.
oh, cool.
Quite and
So
cherry, not quite a good combination, I will say.
Oh,
Bitterness and the bitterness of the quinine and the sweetness of the sherry kind of made a weird taste in my
Mm.
mouth. But
okay.
what are you gonna do?
And then you went on to do, as you said, the scientific method because you didn't actually know, since William Bakey didn't really enumerate how much quinine to take just to take it. So you just sort of did this experimentation, I guess, 26 times until you found the optimal dosage was one that made your ears ring.
Yep.
Oh boy.
You,
Oh no.
you. That's how we did it back then. You just drink it, pass out, hope you wake up. Some people didn't wake up, and I
So,
woke up.
so Santosh, I think we learned this in medical school. What do you call it when you get ear ringing specifically related to quinine?
I'm trying to remember. It's a form of tinnitus, but I'm trying to remember the name of the actual symptom, the quinine ear ringing. I can't remember right now. Do you remember, Josh?
The name, I know it. We didn't call it tinnitus.
Synchronism.
Oh, Sinchins. Why is that?
It's named after the tree that the quinine comes from. Being a physician, I can tell you some other poisons, other toxins and poisons can also cause ringing in the ear when it's taken in excess.
Oh, like what?
Can you guys, doctors from the future, think of any?
I mean, some of them are ones that I don't know if you'd be familiar with, as they haven't been discovered or invented yet. But the first one I think of, isn't there an antibiotic that causes it as well, like an amoxicillin, Santosh?
Well, aminoglycosides
Oh, sure.
like gentamicin and tobramycin, and I don't believe they were around at all during your time, Dr. Livingston, but
Sounds like
those will
gibberish.
actually cause hearing loss.
What one medicine extracted from the tree bark of the willow tree when taken in excess and when you're near death?
Aspirin.
Oh, well, that is fascinating because yeah, aspirin absolutely would have been around. You guys were excellent botanists.
I tried that too. It's terrible with sherry. I don't recommend.
Oh no.
Do not recommend. I'm not trying aminoglycoside with sherry now that you mention it.
So you were doing this scientific experimentation where you found the dose of quinine that would prevent malaria. You had a couple ideas that maybe were a little out of date in terms of the disease being linked to swamps. You also felt you had read these other journals by J.L. McWilliam that had described a whole bunch of tar-like deposits that lines the gallbladder and blood vessels of malaria patients, and this was in your preparation. So I believe you invented something, a special malaria laxative.
To be fair, in our days, we loved purging leeches, induced vomiting, laxatives. We thought those things were therapeutic. It's not limited to malaria treatment.
So you would reason that all this tar-like deposits would make the disease worse, that they would accumulate. So by purging, you could prevent symptoms. So regular movements of the bowels would act to clear this material. What was in your formula?
The most beautiful plant you can think of. It turns gorgeously beautiful purple in the morning. It's an epomea plant, also
Oh.
known as the morning glory.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
The girl from Ipanema. I'm sorry, Dr. Livingston. That song is far in the future.
I thought, cleansing the bowels, to which the biliary system is attached to, would solve the issue.
Oh, I see. Because malaria, at least the falciparum that you are used to seeing here, has a liver stage.
I
And
certainly did not know that.
so, Dr. Livingston, you don't know this yet, but later on, we're actually going to find the cause of malaria, which is a small, tiny single-celled parasite. And I know that.
What?
Yeah. I know that you didn't know the exact reason why, but you are actually attacking the liver, and one of the stages of malaria is in the liver. So I don't know if it, I don't know if your treatment will exactly work, but oddly enough, your rationale is right on point.
You are one of the leading, I guess, what we would call in the modern day influencers, Dr. Livingston, because your malaria laxative, which had not only morning glory, but also rhubarb, quinine, and calomel for,
Oh,
added effect,
sure.
uh, was later marketed throughout Britain by Burroughs Wellcome and Company as Livingston's Rousers, which just kudos on that name. It would definitely rouse you.
Thank you. I put that on TikTok, and by that I mean a watch that goes tick tock tick tock.
Josh, maybe we shouldn't tell him now, but he should really back off all the calomel because the calomel contains mercury.
Good for my syphilis. Okay.
Oh dear.
So here's the problem, though. I know you did help to save a lot of lives in Africa through your medical treatments, but you also indirectly influenced a few deaths as seen and hearing about your success, and we'll talk about your journals and your journeys in a moment. Thousands of missionaries followed you, kind of hoping to follow in your footsteps, but a lot of them didn't know of the importance of quinine, and hundreds upon hundreds died of malaria, even though you left stashes at all these churches that you explored along the way and founded.
Yeah, you tried your best.
I did, and I'm sorry, guys. I was a terrible missionary.
Oh no. Aw.
So let's go over. I mean, I want to give you a little bit of credit. I know we've been heckling you about the 27 bouts of malaria, but let's wrote about it in your journal. Your first bout was as early as May of 1853, and as you were kind of trekking all around Africa from south to central to Angola, uh, you every time you caught malaria, you made really detailed records of the symptoms, the fever, how long it lasted, the response to whatever dose of quinine you were up to. And only 7 years after you die, and I'm afraid I won't give you that year, but only 7 years after you die, the French doctor Alphonse Levera managed to identify the malaria parasite. So you just missed that window, um, and
I feel like you
almost.
guys are being huge bummers.
Well, no, but you made so many changes. In fact, your distant cousin, Sir Ronald Ross, finally proved the link between mosquitoes and the disease.
I'm glad at least, you know what, my life's work made a difference.
So
Wonderful.
so I want to talk about kind of your different. You had three major expeditions throughout Africa, and the first one, of course, is the most famous in your time. Although we know a little bit more about your third. Uh, the first one, what were you doing? I mean, aside from your missionary work, did you have a particular goal?
I was fascinated by the rivers Nile and Zambezi.
So, did you ever discover where one of the headwaters of those was, or
No, no, not so much. It's a really long river. Lots of crocodiles. Chomp chomps.
Yeah.
but you found, you did end up finding, I think, the head of the Zambezi River, and along the way, one of the most famous tourist attractions today in Africa, the smoke that thunders, or Victoria Falls.
Oh, that was a beautiful day. I kissed my beautiful wife on that day, and I said, you know what? Nothing is as beautiful as you except these falls.
Aw, that
Well,
sounds really
that's
sweet.
and
Backhanded compliment.
you went back, you wrote a huge book about your expedition and finding the Nile. I guess you left the quinine out because that's what all those missionaries forgot to bring after you, but you must have been a
Oopsies.
very persuasive author. So about 15 after, sort of 15 years living in and around South Africa, you returned to Britain, you fundraised, and you started looking for another expedition to find the source of the Nile. And I know on this one, your wife came along, and your second expedition, it sounds like, didn't go quite as well. So I have some of the accounts of people who traveled with you, but what can you tell us about that expedition?
Well, my wife Mary was a little upset that I said that she was the most beautiful thing in the world except for Victoria Falls. So I figured maybe I take her on another expedition, a second honeymoon, so to speak, to find the source of the Nile. And well, a lot of diseases, a lot of mosquitoes, lots of crocodiles, lots of chomp chomps along the river.
But I mean, she must
And
have gotten sick as well, right? Did you
she
bring enough quinine?
she said it was too bitter, and she said, "Hey, that does not belong in the Shirley Temple. It's Shirley Temple is technically just grenadine and soda." So
Oh
She didn't.
dear.
She didn't take her quinine.
I think you're not being entirely fair to her. She knew the danger. She had traveled with you, but
Oh,
I
she also got
understand.
super sick, and she kept vomiting. So, and she couldn't keep any of her quinine down.
Well, I'm sorry to kind of bash on some of your many great accomplishments, but it sounds like although you were an excellent explorer and a wonderful physician, you were maybe not the greatest boss and expedition leader. Because during this second trip, what few members of your party didn't die of malaria, including my condolences, your wife Mary, abandoned you. Everyone aside from the other physician along on the trip, who even noted, like, I don't know why Dr. Livingstone is so obsessed with the Nile when everyone's sort of dropping dead around him, but I guess to each his own. And they just were not terribly impressed by your leadership. And I know the second edition, even though you considered it a failure, having not discovered the source of the Nile, you returned to Britain in disgrace. But I think it's important to put in context that this expedition generated over 100 different scientific papers about the flora, fauna, and treatments of inner Africa.
Sometimes when you have a vision and other people don't share your vision, and you just have to keep on pushing and going ahead. And unfortunately, a lot of people didn't share my vision. But I was ahead of my times.
And humble too.
And also a terrible boss, I will give you that. That
Yeah.
came up during therapy.
It does sound like you, as a naturalist and as an inquisitive scientist and physician, you had a lot more traction there than trying to lead a team. But it sounds like your own powers of observation and deduction, work pretty well on their own to help forward our understanding of treatment and um, malaria and a couple of other diseases.
Well, funny that you mentioned that. I noticed that there were lots of flies flying around, the tsetse flies that bite, and when you
We're
if you
actually we are very, very lucky, by the way, if you'll tell us about your discovery, because in our time, your understanding helped recognize that the tsetse fly was a bad actor, and they actually spray to destroy those flies now, so we can go there and be kind of disease free.
well, I just happen to notice that people who were bitten by these tsetse flies, a lot of them end up coming down with, well, they don't they sleep and they don't wake up.
Oh, sleeping sickness.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I also noticed that other bugs like the ticks, they're associated with a cyclical fever.
So,
You are a pioneer, or not a fairly early pioneer, in vector-borne diseases.
Well, I mean, a lot of my crew came down with these diseases. They'd call me a terrible boss. I call myself a scientist. I don't know.
well, I'll grant you that.
Both, maybe.
While your expedition died a lot of malaria, you did keep them out of areas where these tompan ticks lived, so they did not get relapsing remitting fever. So kudos to you for that. Um, and yeah, this tsetse fly. I think one of the most fascinating things I read going over your journals is we know today that the tsetse fly parasite can fool the immune system through a process we call antigenic variation. But even though that
Double.
was even though that was a little bit, after your time, you had written inoculation does not ensure immunity, as animals that have been slightly bitten in one year can perish from a greater number of bites in the next. And that's not
Hmm.
something you would expect from an infectious disease. Uh, one of the things I think you'd be very happy to hear is you were one of the ones who sort of developed a therapy to treat this disease, even though you're like, you can't guarantee immunity. you wrote a letter to the British Medical Journal when you treated some of the draft animals on your expeditions. So, what did you say in that? Because it was a fascinating story.
Well, back in those days, we didn't have that many chemicals at our disposal. It was just your mercuries, your quinines, and your arsenic.
Well, I think I have a
Oh,
copy of your letter right here. The italics are a little bit hard for me to make out, but it's your handwriting, so I'm sure that you can.
I had a mare that belonged to a certain Mr. Gordon Cumming, and after a prolonged exposure to a bite of an insect, it looked bad and it was left to die. So I gave it 2 grains of arsenic in barley.
oh,
Wow,
wow.
wow.
And
So, what happened?
then uh, that induced a little pox thing that came out, and I said, okay, well, let me discontinue for this and see what happens.
Okay.
And when the eruption disappeared, the animal's coat became smooth and glossy. So I figured I cured him.
Great. So,
Oh,
fixed
okay.
forever, right?
Well, funny you should say that. 2 months later, after this cure, the coat began to look bad again, and this time it looked dry and harsh. And I gave him more arsenic,
Oh,
as we
okay.
do.
Did it
Okay.
work?
The mare looked like a skeleton and refused to touch the barley. And
Oh no. Oh, got sick. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
is that eventually the mare died.
But much
Wow.
later than she would have had you done nothing.
Right, that's something.
So,
Hmm.
because I believe a little bit later, influenced by these early experiments, some scientists, Harold Wolferston Thomas and Anton Breinel, actually showed that the disease that causes uh, this sleeping sickness that's transmitted by the tsetse fly is susceptible to arsenic. Even today, in the year we come from, the arsenic based drug melarsoprol is still the only drug available to treat stage 2 sleeping sickness.
Yeah, I think you'll be very happy to hear, Dr. Livingston, that because you were able to trace down the vector, the tsetse fly, we actually went on the attack of the tsetse fly and have nearly wiped out this disease. So, a consequence of that is that not a lot of folks worked on another type of cure. So, even though that arsenic is quite toxic to the patient, we still have found that it's the most effective treatment. It's even in and of itself, just like with your poor mare, it's not a fantastic treatment. It's not
It's horse
wonderful.
poison, Doctor.
Yeah, it's
Santhosh.
it's it's
You mean to
everybody
tell me
poison. Yeah,
in the future we're still using arsenic?
I know, but the reason we got kind of kept with it is because the effects of wiping out the tsetse flies as much as possible greatly reduced the burden of the disease. So there wasn't as much of a push to actually discover newer cures. So your treatment is still in use today in our time. And honestly, because of your observation on the vector, we were able to actually do a lot more to take out this infection by actually going after that tsetse fly.
I named that mare Mary after my own wife. I
Oh,
tried to keep her alive.
Well,
I'm
I
so
know
sorry.
you put a tsetse fly on the cover of your second book, which you wrote with your brother. So again, even though you may have considered your second expedition a failure, you still did pretty well off of it, as did science. And then you kind of get back to your third expedition in 1866, and that's sort of where we've come and met you today, near the end of your third expedition. I know after the disastrous second, no more Europeans wanted to come along with you, so you have your African companions here. Um, I understand that this expedition did not get off to a great start, and a lot of your supplies had been stolen. which meant you were looking towards times 27, maybe 28 on malaria. And it looks like you also had to rely on the help of slavers, which couldn't have been fun for you because I know you're very, very anti-slavery.
Yeah, those guys are not great.
Kind of got lost. You were without supplies, and that's, of course, when the reporter Henry Morgan Stanley found you and asked the question that we started this episode with, which I'm sure you're sick of hearing. Um, but before Santosh and I kind of head back on our way, and thank you for this interview. How you been feeling lately? Just curious.
Well, funny you should ask that, guys. I was feeling so good when you talked to me about my accomplishments that I forgot about my physical ailments.
Oh,
One, I'm pale.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
weak.
mm-hmm.
Mm, my artery just keeps giving off a permanent stream. By that I bleed easily.
oh
Uh,
no.
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
told I don't look good, and tummy kind of hurts. Oh
Okay.
boy.
Well, I mean, in your first book, you brag that you've drunk water swarming in insects, thick with mud, putrid with rhinoceros urine and buffalo dung.
Oh
So,
gosh.
so
I
maybe
did all that.
you're still pretty hardy, and we're going to wish you the best recovery, and we've brought a little bit more quinine for you.
Thank you,
And
sirs.
and we're gonna
That's
kind
gonna
of
help my bloody diarrhea.
it will certainly do something. And yeah, so thank you so much for talking with us. We're actually gonna head out and look for our friend who seems to have wandered off. And we look forward to whatever else you may have for us in the future.
Hey guys, if you do get the chance, Victoria Falls is it actually is breathtaking.
Oh,
Wonderful.
I have to
More
visit one day.
more beautiful than my wife Mary. May she rest in peace.
Oh.
Well, thank you so much, and we're just gonna step away off into these bushes here. Please ignore any lights and sounds you see, and rest assured we are definitely nearby somewhere. So we'll catch you later, Dr. Livingston, and
Farewell.
off we go. And Santosh, could you do me a favor and flip that switch? I think it's related to the tracking beacon I put in the helmet after the
Uh,
last time.
oh, you put a track. What now? You're telling me now? Fine. Poor guy, Dr. Livingston. He's absolutely, a pioneer in so many fields of infectious diseases and very observant bloke. We were very fortunate to have his journals. All right. Okay. All right.
Wow, that worked fast. So,
Um,
what happened to you, Ward? You put on the helmet, and next thing we know, you vanished, and
is me, Dr. Livingston.
we
We
did.
did.
We
Oh
did.
my God! Come on, guys.
Well, I mean, we only have a limited amount of time here before the Wayback Machine loses juice, so we wanted to interview him.
Electric vehicles, am I right?
Well, I guess, really, unbelievable.
I don't know why. I feel like having a gin and tonic, guys.
It was so weird, Ward. Dr. Livingston, just reminded me of you in so many ways. Even though you weren't able to meet Dr. Livingston, Ward, I thought maybe we could all kind of differentially diagnose him based on some of his final journals. So you may be able to help with that in using your emergency knowledge, although it's a little bit less urgent for him now, back in the modern day. Dr. Livingston ended up dying in 1871 and was writing in his journal all the way up until the day of his death, which gave us some pretty tantalizing clues. He did, of course, have terrible hemorrhoids and a lot of bleeding, and Yeah, I think he had mentioned he was having like just a permanent stream of blood since the 31st of March, like 2
Oh boy.
months. And
Oh dear.
at a certain point, he became unable to walk. His employees, who were local African natives, carried him to Chief Chambo's village on the edge of the swamp. And on the morning of May 1st, they found him dead, kneeling at the side of his bed, as if in prayer.
Oh.
So let's kind of speculate. So we mentioned just days before he died, he was writing about this permanent stream of blood relating to hemorrhoids, this acute intestinal pain that left him incapable of walking. Uh,
Oh, wow. There's a lot going on there, and he's been exposed to just about everything and anything, some of which was self-imposed, right? He
The
drank
27 pounds of
water
malaria.
swarming with insects and thick with mud and putrid with rhinoceros urine and buffalo dung. Was that part of what we were reading here?
that was his first book.
Oh dear.
That's the
Well, like he
opener.
was
Hey guys.
compensating for something. You do not need to do that.
Well, okay, I mean, so amoebic dysentery, if that was his first book way back when, that wouldn't have lasted all the way to his death.
Sure, but that
That's
would
an acute
absolutely
disease.
cause chronic bloody diarrhea.
If
Um,
he kept doing it, yeah.
Well, I mean, he did. He went back for 3 expeditions and got malaria 27 times. It doesn't seem like he was drinking from pristine springs.
Sure.
Didn't he keep taking arsenic? Or
Sure.
no, I'm sorry, not arsenic. Was it arsenic or
Well, it
quinine?
was arsenic. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah. So,
he took quinine over and over to prevent malaria, but he probably did take
Probably
arsenic-based
didn't.
companions as well.
And
yeah,
he also probably didn't know the dose, so he took it
well, no,
until
no,
the
because
years
if
ran.
the fact that he gave the arsenic granules to his mare meant that he had arsenic granules with him.
Well, I mean, who didn't back in those days?
Right.
But when his companions removed his organs, because I don't know if you guys know this, but when Livingston was buried, they removed his organs in order to sun dry his body, so kind of mummify him. His
Oh.
even though his body was shipped back to the United Kingdom, his heart was buried under a mapundu tree in the village, and that's where a memorial now stands because his heart was always in Africa. And then
Hmm.
they covered his body with a tar cloth, transported it over 1,000 miles to the coast, and then shipped it back to the United Kingdom. And you know how his body was confirmed to be his? An
How?
old By examining an old injury on his left arm from a lion attack. We forgot to ask him about it being attacked by a lion.
Oh my gosh. So they were able, if you are indeed Livingston, show me your arm. Like that kind of a thing?
Well, he couldn't show him much. They lifted the cloth and been like, "Yep, there's only so many gentlemen who are going to have lion attacks of this particular skin tone." So,
Yeah.
So, sounds like the Dos Equis most interesting guy in the world.
yeah, for a while he was.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so when they were kind of removing his organs to sun dry his body, they noted a blood clot as large as a fist inside his body.
Ooh.
Um, and if we say that, I mean, I guess that could have been maybe a swollen spleen. Uh,
It
but
could have,
that
as in
combined,
if the spleen was just completely congested and clotted off.
hmm
Yeah, that could be malaria. It could be leptospira.
I mean, I guess it could even
Stricto.
be a ball of worms.
I'm almost certain if there were helmets, they would have seen it as helmets. I mean, it's pretty hard to mistake them from anything else.
And I
Okay,
think certain lymphomas and other non-infectious diseases can cause that as well.
so we've got like a huge clot. We've got blood loss from hemorrhoids. We have multiple bouts of malaria. Uh, so what do we think killed Livingston? Like if we're filling out the death certificate on him.
Uh, if he's acutely ill with bleeding from multiple spots and orifices, I would vote for a hemorrhagic fever. But I don't know if this illness lasted. Was
No,
it
no, no.
days, weeks, months?
he died on May 1st, and he wrote he had been bleeding since March 31st. So we're talking at
Oh,
least
way too long.
30 straight days is way too long for a hemorrhagic fever.
Yeah, you're right.
He had acute abdominal pain that left him incapable of walking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so the dysenteric diseases can cause that. The sepsis from anything that broke through the bowel barrier that could do that. Perforated bowels can do that.
Yeah, arsenic in and of itself is a horrible gastric irritant and would slowly but surely lead to, melena, black tarry stools, and eventually, widespread intestinal bleeding. So that would do it.
Could his 29th time of
Malaria.
catching malaria?
So weirdly enough, no. Malaria is one of these things, especially if it's the same species over and over again, that you kind of start to handle after a while. That's kind of the interesting thing. If you survive your first few bouts of malaria, then it starts to become like their version of the flu. Like you just go, oh, I caught malaria again this year, and you just move on with your life. We had travelers from Michigan. We had travelers from Nairobi who actually came in and visited us in Los Angeles, and they got sick, and they had just gotten off the plane maybe 5 days prior, and it was very obvious to them that they had malaria, but we admitted them to the hospital. We found it. The kids' parasitemia, no kidding, was 30%. We freak out about like 1 to 2% parasitemia in the blood on a smear, but he was just handling it, and the parents were looking at us like we were the weirdest people. They're just like, hey, just give us our meds and let us leave, because they were so used to just catching malaria over and over.
The first 26 times are rough, but the 27th,
no. No, it's not true. So the malaria, if he had active malaria on top of something else, right? So he was dealing with a horrible dysentery, and then boom, he had to deal with malaria, and it was just too much for him to handle. I would bank on him having more than one disease.
I'm going to say schistosomiasis. Because he had the intestinal pain, he had chronic bleeding. He's bent over his bed as if in prayer, or as if, maybe clutching at his stomach to provide some extra relief.
Giant spleen.
And then that blood clot as large as a fist. Because, the liver flukes are going to affect your clotting capabilities.
Okay.
So that is my final guess. Although I suppose we'll never know unless we want to go. We can't even dig up his body. His heart is in one place. The rest of him's in another.
You know what? He lived a full life, and probably a fuller life than I've lived so far, for sure.
I mean, you've had your fair share of tropical injuries.
I'm actually very happy to know and to say that we have all enjoyed, a good amount of adventures and, overseas medicine stuff. But you're right. It really kind of pales in comparison to just the sheer amount of time he spent, the impact that he had, and the adventurousness, because a lot of what we do it because we know how to be safe and what to do in case we get sick. They didn't.
Can you even imagine taking an antibiotic until you start seeing side effects?
Because there's no other way to measure it.
Yeah. What's the effective dose? Might be going deaf. Maybe I should scale back a bit.
We have a handful of these examples. Like nowadays, when you have severe coccidioidomycosis or cryptococcal infection, right, meningitis, you basically push the dose of amphotericin until they can't take it anymore. Meaning that
actually also true. In preeclampsia or eclampsia, you dial up the magnesium until the patellar reflexes are a little hyporeflexive.
Oh,
you do too much and they become too obtunded. But so, oh my gosh, we're still doing.
Well, yeah, there's
taking arsenic and doing this.
Oh dear.
So, again, I think when we started this journey, we all knew that Dr. Livingstone had been found by Stanley and that he spent time in Africa, and that was pretty much it. I don't know if most folks are aware that he discovered started arsenic as a treatment for sleeping sickness, or even discovered the links between insects and sleeping sickness. He was one of the fathers of tropical medicine.
I wish I met him. Jealous.
I
Well,
would have loved to have
I'll
hang
tell
with
you
him.
what, Ward. Next time we head back that way, because we do have a few more trips to Africa to talk about its medical history, we'll pick you up a bottle of Livingstone's Rousers, which is another thing I don't think you were aware of, that he had his own patent medicine.
No, please don't, because the calomel is mercury.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, but
Oh.
it had morning glory in it too.
But also toxic. Stop it.
Okay,
I need
what about rhubarb?
Rhubarb. You can have all the rhubarb you want.
You know what, guys? I've been a little backed up anyways, so I'm happy to try these.
So believe it or not, the calomel kind of, it was used for a long time for that kind of purging, just like we talked about with Dr. Livingstone, Ward. It was that idea of purging was one that calomel mercury was prescribed to Lewis and Clark, because all they had was a meat-rich diet, so they'd get all stuffed up, constipated. So they'd take this mercurious calomel, which were called thunderclappers. And so nowadays we can trace Lewis and Clark's journey by the mercury that they left.
Oh, and those thunderclappers were patented by a Dr. Benjamin Rush.
Oh, so calomel all over the damn place.
Whoop, to Dr. Benjamin Rush. We trained at some of his hospitals, all three of us.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
Also one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, now known for his impressive pooping medicine.
So yeah, that's the same medication that I guess Dr. Livingstone was using, I presume.
No, he made his own. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No thunderclappers for him. He had rousers. But that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed one of our new segments. As always, we love to hear your comments, questions, and feedback. This show is produced by me with a lot of help from Dr. Santhosh and friends. If you'd like to support us spiritually, emotionally, or financially, links to do that are in the show notes, or you can sign up for our mailing list. Our theme music is composed by Rachel Leisure. And until next time, as always, keep a song in your heart, soap on your hands, a shot in your arm, a spin on your globe, a supply of quinine if you're going to that part of the world. And once you've chosen a destination and done all those things, happy travels, and don't touch stuff in the Wayback Machine.
Bye, everybody. Please don't drink water with hippo urine in it.
Hey, guys, what does this button do?
Oh, God, no!